The rain was heavy that Sunday morning. The sky was dark, the wind was cold, and most people had run indoors to hide from the storm. But not her. She stood right there at the junction. Rain dripping from her hair, her Bible lifted high, her voice cutting through the sound of the storm. I had been on my way to buy bread from the shop down the street, but something made me stop. A crowd had gathered under the rain. Some people had umbrellas, others didn't bother. All eyes were fixed on her. She wasn't just preaching. She was commanding the air. Her voice was not too loud, but it carried weight. Every word felt like it was reaching deep into the bones. "The power of God is here," she shouted. "You have been in chains for too long. Today you will be free." I saw an old man limping forward. She laid her hand on his head, prayed in a language I didn't understand, then told him to walk. First he staggered. Then suddenly he began to walk normally. The crowd gasped. Some screamed, "Hallelujah!" Others fell to their knees. Me? I just stood there, completely frozen. There was something about her face. She wasn't the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, but there was a strange glow around her. A fire. When the rain became heavier, she didn't move. Instead, she kept preaching, talking about the love of God, about deliverance, about faith. When the service finally ended, people rushed to thank her. Some gave her money, others hugged her, crying. I stood at the corner, waiting for the crowd to go down before I approached her. When it was just the two of us, I smiled nervously and said, "Sister, your message really touched me." She turned, looked straight into my eyes, and smiled. It wasn't an ordinary smile. It was the kind that felt like she could see straight into my soul. "The Lord told me you would come," she said softly. My heart skipped. "How?" I asked. "Some things cannot be explained, only revealed," she replied. I didn't know it then, but those words would follow me for the rest of my life. We ended up walking together under the rain. She told me her name was Naomi, that she had been in ministry since she was 15. She spoke about her dreams, her visions, and how God had told her she would meet a man who would help her ministry grow. I listened quietly, feeling a strange warmth in my chest. When I dropped her at her house that day, she prayed for me. She laid her hand on my shoulder and said, "The Lord will open the doors of your business." At the time, my shop had been struggling for months. Customers were few, bills were many. But within 2 weeks after that prayer, things began to change. Orders came in. Old debts were paid. I was convinced this was not an ordinary woman. She was a gift from God. I started visiting her more often. Sometimes we would pray together. Other times we would just talk for hours about life. There was a peace I felt around her. She seemed wise beyond her years. 3 months later, I asked her to be my wife. She didn't say yes immediately. She prayed for a week, then came to my shop one afternoon and said, "God has spoken. We are meant to be." That was all I needed to hear. Our wedding was like a crusade. The church was full. The choir sang like angels, and everyone kept saying we were destined for great things. People gave us gifts, money, clothes, furniture. Naomi was glowing that day, smiling at everyone, blessing people as they came. I stood by her side, proud, certain that I had found my life partner. But now, as I look back, I realize I was stepping into a world I knew nothing about. If only I had known then, if only I had seen the shadows hiding behind that fire in her eyes, maybe I wouldn't be telling you this story today. After the wedding, Naomi didn't waste time. One night, while we were having dinner, she put down her spoon and said, "God spoke to me today. He said it's time to start my own ministry." I looked at her, confused. "But you're already preaching in church. Why not continue there?" She smiled, calm, confident, and sure. "This is different. The Lord wants me to have a place where people can come every day, not just Sunday, a place where the fire never goes out." I had learned something about Naomi. When she said God spoke to her, nothing could change her mind. We rented a small hall in the market area. It had only 20 plastic chairs, a small pulpit, and a ceiling fan that made more noise than wind. On the first day, there were just 13 people. But Naomi preached like she was speaking to thousands. She talked about healing. She talked about faith. She said God was going to do something mighty in that place. At the end, she prayed for a woman who had been blind in one eye for years. The woman began to scream, saying she could see again. People rushed out to see. The market women began shouting, "Come and see what God has done." By the next Sunday, the hall was full. It was like something exploded. Every week, new testimonies came. A man with kidney problems said he was healed. A barren couple said they were expecting twins. Someone else said their business had tripled after Naomi prayed. People began calling her the woman with the fire. Gifts started pouring in: bags of rice, clothes, even a small car. Money flowed into the ministry account. I was proud. I thought, God truly sent me this woman. One night, I woke up and found Naomi's side of the bed empty. I went to the sitting room, but she wasn't there. The front door was unlocked, so I stepped outside. I saw her at the far end of the compound, kneeling under the moonlight. She was dressed in pure white. Her hands were lifted high, her face turned toward the sky. At first, I thought she was just praying. But then I realized she wasn't praying in tongues like she usually did. She was whispering words I had never heard before. Words that didn't sound like any language I knew. It sent a shiver down my spine. I stood there for a while, then quietly went back inside. When she returned, I asked what she was doing. She smiled faintly and said, "It's midnight prayer. Very deep. You wouldn't understand these things, my love." I wanted to ask more questions, but the way she looked at me, it was like a warning not to push. As weeks passed, her confidence in the pulpit grew. She spoke like a queen. Sometimes she would look at people and tell them their secrets without them saying a word. People cried in her services. Men bowed to her. Women knelt before her for blessings. I was happy for her, but I couldn't ignore the feeling in my heart. Something about her power didn't feel the same. I told myself I was just overthinking, but I had no idea the real darkness was only beginning to show its face. At first, I thought everything Naomi did was for the work of God. She was passionate, she was committed, and she seemed ready to sacrifice anything for her ministry. But then, little by little, I started noticing things that didn't make sense. The special deliverances. It began with what she called private deliverances. One afternoon, she came home and said, "Darling, God has given me a new instruction. Some people's problems are too sensitive to pray for in the open. I will need to meet them in my office alone." I raised my eyebrows. Alone? Why not have at least one other person there? Maybe a deacon or an usher? She smiled and touched my face. "Some spirits are shy, my love. They don't leave when there's a crowd. I have to deal with them privately." Her explanation didn't sit well with me, but I didn't argue. At first, the private deliverances happened in the evenings, but soon they began stretching late into the night. She would leave home after dinner, saying a church member was in urgent need of prayer, and return around midnight, sometimes past 1 in the morning. Whenever I asked why it took so long, she would say, "Some demons don't leave easily." I tried to believe her, but something inside me was restless. One Wednesday evening, I decided to surprise her by picking her up from church after service. When I got there, the hall was empty, except for faint voices coming from her office. I knocked. The voices stopped. After a long pause, Naomi opened the door just a little. She stepped outside, closing it behind her so I couldn't see inside. Her face was flushed, a little sweaty. She told me she would be done in 30 minutes and that I should wait in the car. I wanted to push the door open, but something in her eyes warned me not to try. Another night, I went to the shop to collect something and saw a young man I recognized from her church, standing at the corner of the street. When he saw me, he quickly turned away. I called out his name, but he pretended not to hear. The next Sunday, I saw him in church again, kneeling before Naomi while she laid her hand on his head. Her eyes were closed, but the man, he wasn't looking at the floor. He was staring at her, with a strange expression I can't even describe. That night, when we got home, I asked Naomi directly, "This young man you pray for all the time, what's his problem?" She didn't even look up from removing her earrings. "That's none of your concern, my love. What matters is that he will be free." And then she said something that chilled me. "Remember, I am your wife, but I am also God's servant. Some things you can never question." Her words stayed in my head for days. It was the first time I truly wondered, what exactly is my wife doing behind those locked doors? I told myself I would find out, but I didn't know that the truth would almost destroy me. It was a Friday evening, and Naomi told me she would be having a very important deliverance for one of her sons in the Lord. She said the case was urgent and might take hours. I nodded, but deep down, I was restless. Something in my chest wouldn't sit still. That entire night, I couldn't concentrate on anything. TV felt boring. My phone felt heavy. Around midnight, I finally decided, I can't just sit here. I drove to the church. The building was dark, except for a faint light coming from her office window. The main hall was silent, too silent. No music, no prayers, no voices from the pulpit. Only the sound of my own footsteps on the tiled floor. Then I heard it, muffled voices. They were coming from the office at the far end of the hall. First, I thought she was praying softly, but then the sound changed. It started with heavy breathing, low groans. Then, a sound that made my blood run cold. My wife's voice moaning. I froze. The air around me felt heavy, like the whole room had turned into stone. I wanted to rush to the door, but my legs refused to move. The groaning became faster. The breathing became louder. And then, I heard a man's voice whisper her name, softly, almost like a lover. That was the moment my heart cracked. I felt something inside me die. I don't know how long I stood there, rooted to the spot. The sounds stopped suddenly. Then I heard movement, clothes being adjusted, a chair scraping the floor. The door opened, and there she was, my wife. Her hair was slightly messy, her lipstick faintly smudged, her face still flushed. Behind her was a young man from the church, one of her so-called sons in the Lord. He avoided my eyes, clutching his Bible like a shield. Naomi's eyes widened when she saw me. For a moment, her face showed fear, but it disappeared almost instantly. She smiled as if nothing was wrong. "Oh, you're here," she said calmly. "We just finished a very deep deliverance." On the way home, she acted like nothing happened. She talked about the next Sunday service, about the people who would be coming for healing, about how God was moving in her ministry. I didn't say a word. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, I could feel my nails digging into my palms. I knew what I had heard, and I knew that whatever my wife was doing, it wasn't from God. That night, I decided I wouldn't live another day without knowing the full truth. And when she finally told me, it was worse than I could have ever imagined. We got home that night in silence. She went straight to the bedroom, took off her shoes, and began removing her earrings like nothing had happened. I stood at the door, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. Finally, I spoke. "Naomi, I was at the church. I heard you." She didn't look up. She just kept removing her earrings, one by one. "I don't know what you think you heard," she said softly, "but some things in ministry are too deep for ordinary people to understand." I stepped closer. "Deep? Is that what you call what you were doing with that man?" That was when she finally looked at me, and instead of guilt, her eyes held pity. She sat on the bed, crossed her legs, and patted the space beside her. "Come and sit. I will tell you everything." My heart was racing, but I sat down. She took a deep breath. "I am not just a prophetess," she began. "I belong to a spiritual society. We are chosen vessels. The power you see in me, it must be renewed every 3 months." I frowned. "Renewed? How?" Her eyes didn't blink. Her voice didn't shake. "Through a ritual. And part of that ritual involves intimacy with men chosen by the spirits. That is how the fire is kept alive." I felt like the room was spinning. "You're telling me you sleep with church members for power?" "I don't choose them. The spirits do. And when it is done, my power increases. Without it, the miracles stop. The church will fall. People will lose their faith. And you," She leaned closer. You will lose the life you are enjoying. Her words hit me like stones. I wanted to shout, to scream, to tell her she was a liar. But deep down, I knew I had seen enough signs to believe her. I thought about the strange things in our home, the shadows that moved at night, the whispers in the dark, the sudden cold air in the middle of the night. I had ignored them all. Now I understood. This woman I married, the woman I thought was sent by God, was serving something. She must have seen the fear in my eyes because she smiled faintly and said, "You must never speak of this to anyone. The spirits do not like betrayal. If you want to keep your life, keep your mouth shut." I stared at her in silence, my whole body numb. That night, I lay beside her, but it felt like I was lying next to a stranger. And in my heart, I knew this marriage would not survive much longer. After that night, nothing felt the same. The woman lying next to me in bed wasn't my wife anymore. She was someone else. I couldn't look at her the same way, couldn't touch her, couldn't even share the same plate of food without feeling my stomach turn. She didn't seem bothered. In fact, she became even more confident, more powerful in church. Every Sunday, I watched her from the front row. She stood on the altar like a queen on her throne. Her voice was commanding, her prophecies sharp. She would call people out, tell them things about their lives that only they knew, and they would cry and fall to the ground. The more I saw it, the more I felt trapped. Everyone worshipped her like she was a holy angel. Only I knew the truth. At night, the house didn't feel like a home anymore. Sometimes the doors would open by themselves. Sometimes, I'd hear footsteps in the hallway when I knew Naomi was asleep. Other times, a cold wind would blow into the room even though all the windows were shut. Once, I woke up in the middle of the night and saw her standing by the window in her white prayer gown, staring into the dark. When I asked what she was looking at, she turned slowly and said, "They are here, watching us." I didn't sleep again that night. One Sunday afternoon, I decided not to go to church. I told Naomi I was tired and needed rest. While I was at home, my phone rang. It was my cousin Daniel. He sounded nervous, almost ashamed. Before I could even ask what was wrong, he said, "Brother, I think I've made a terrible mistake. Prophetess Naomi, your wife, she said the spirit chose me." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. "Chose you for what?" I asked, my voice shaking. There was silence on the other end. And then he whispered the words that confirmed my worst fear. "She slept with me. She said it was for my deliverance." I dropped the phone and sat there in silence. I felt like my chest was on fire, my head pounding. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was war. She had crossed into my own family. And I knew, if I stayed any longer, she would destroy me completely. That night, I made my decision. I would leave, but I had to do it quietly, before she or her spirits stopped me. After Daniel's confession, I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Naomi's soft breathing beside me. She slept peacefully as if nothing was wrong, as if she hadn't crossed the line in the worst way possible. But I knew, if I stayed in that house one more week, maybe even one more day, I would lose my mind. I couldn't tell her I was leaving. I had seen what she was capable of, the strange cold winds, the moving shadows, the way her eyes sometimes looked like they belonged to someone else. If she sensed my plan, she might try to stop me, and I didn't know what stopping me would mean in her world. So, I began moving small things out of the house little by little. An important document today, a set of clothes tomorrow. By the end of the week, I had a small travel bag hidden at the back of my car. It was a Tuesday. Naomi was preparing to leave for another overnight deliverance. She wore her long white gown, her hair tied in a scarf. Before leaving, she smiled at me and said, "Don't wait up. This one will take all night. The spirit is very stubborn." I nodded, forcing a small smile. But inside, my heart was racing, because I knew that by the time she returned, I would be gone. As soon as her car disappeared down the street, I grabbed my bag and locked the door behind me. The night felt strangely quiet, too quiet. I started my car, but before I could drive off, I looked at the house one last time. A part of me still couldn't believe I was leaving everything. The marriage, the home, the life we had built. But I reminded myself, better to leave alive than stay and be destroyed. I drove for hours without stopping, my eyes glued to the rearview mirror. Every time a pair of headlights appeared behind me, my chest tightened, thinking it might be her. By dawn, I reached another city and parked in front of my friend Emmanuel's house. When he opened the door, he was shocked to see me standing there with a travel bag. "What happened? Where's Naomi?" he asked. I shook my head. "Please don't ask. Just let me stay here for a while." He didn't push further. He simply stepped aside. For the first week in Emmanuel's house, I avoided everything that could connect me to Naomi. I didn't call her. I didn't go near the church. I didn't even walk outside too much during the day. But Naomi, she didn't make it easy. The first time she called, I stared at the phone for a long time before answering. Her voice was calm at first. "Darling, where are you? You can't just leave without telling me." I didn't respond. Her tone changed. "Do you think you can run from me? From us? You are my husband, and you are tied to me in ways you don't understand." I hung up. After that, the calls kept coming. Sometimes she cried, sometimes she begged, other times she threatened. Eventually, I stopped answering altogether. Life slowly started to feel normal again. Emmanuel never asked too many questions, and I was grateful for that. I even started thinking maybe, just maybe, I had finally escaped her world. But one Monday morning, I got a call from an unknown number. It was a woman's voice, trembling. "Are you Prophetess, Naomi's husband?" My chest tightened. I used to be," I said cautiously. "I think you should come. She collapsed yesterday during service. She didn't make it to the hospital." The words hit me like a hammer. What do you mean she didn't make it?" "She's gone." "I'm sorry. I didn't go to the funeral, but I heard the stories. Some said it was a spiritual attack from another prophetess who envied her. Others whispered that the same spirits she served had taken her life because she refused to complete a ritual. No one seemed to know the truth. But one thing was certain: Naomi, the woman with the fire, was gone. I thought her death would bring me peace. But I was wrong. Because even in death, Naomi found a way to come back to me. After the call about Naomi's death, I thought it was over. I thought I could finally breathe without fear, sleep without looking over my shoulder. But I was wrong. The first sign came 2 weeks after she was buried. In the dream, I was back in our old house. The lights were off and the whole place was quiet. I was walking through the corridor when I heard her voice behind me. Soft, almost sweet. "Darling." I turned. There she was, Naomi, dressed in her white prayer gown, her face glowing. At first, I felt relief. I thought maybe the years apart had just been a bad dream. But when I tried to speak, she placed a finger on my lips. "You can't run from me. We are still one." I woke up gasping for air. My whole body was wet with after that night. The dreams kept coming. Sometimes, she would just stand at the corner of my room, watching me. Other times, she would smile, stretch out her hand, and say, "Come back to me." Once, her face in the dream began to change. Her eyes became black, her smile stretched too wide, and her voice deepened. I would wake up shaking, my heart pounding. Emmanuel began to notice I wasn't sleeping well. "You keep shouting in your sleep," he told me one morning. "Sometimes you call her name." I didn't want to tell him the truth, but the truth was eating me alive. Naomi was gone. But she wasn't gone. It felt like her spirit was still following me. Or worse, like she had never really left. And then, one night, she spoke words in the dream that froze my soul. Words that made me question everything I thought I knew about her. And about myself. It was the 3rd week after Naomi's burial when I had the dream that broke me completely. I was standing in a wide, empty field. The wind was strong, and the sky above me was dark, as if a storm was coming. In the distance, I saw her, Naomi, walking toward me in slow, steady steps. She was dressed in white, her hair blowing in the wind, her eyes fixed on mine. When she stopped a few feet away, she smiled. But this smile was different. It wasn't warm. It wasn't soft. It was the kind of smile you give when you know something the other person will never understand. "You thought you left me," she said, her voice deep and smooth. "But you don't leave what you belong to." I swallowed hard. You're dead." She tilted her head slightly, still smiling. "Dead? No, the body dies. But the spirit remains where it has work to do." Then she stepped closer until her face was right in front of mine and whispered, "You will always be mine." The moment she said that, the ground beneath me cracked open in the dream, and I felt myself falling into darkness. I woke up with a scream, my heart pounding so fast I thought it might burst. It took me a full minute to realize I was in Emmanuel's guest room, not in that dark field. But even when I sat up in bed, I could still hear her voice in my ears. "You will always be mine." It's been months now. The dreams are less frequent, but they still come. Sometimes I wake up feeling like someone was standing by my bed. Sometimes I smell her perfume in the room, even though she's gone. And so I'm left with one question. One I'm not sure I'll ever be able to answer. Was Naomi ever really my wife? Or was she something else all along? I married the woman with the fire, but I never knew what kind of fire it truly was.